Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the March edition of Molten Music Monthly. Well, I've had quite a month. I don't know about you, but I spent a number of days at a fabulous Thomann Synth Reactor event, which I'll tell you all about in a moment. But coming up in this month's roundup, we have the reinvention of an old EMU sampler. We have some electric pianos made out of pure sine waves. There's a weird Hydronium synthesizer. Doepfer has managed to pull out some polyphonic modules. Roland finally released the TB-303 that we didn't really ask for. Thunderbolt 3 and USB 4 is all getting a bit exciting. Plankton electronics want to spice up your life. There's a very cool little budget Eurorack coming along called Equinox. Doepfer think they've invented pitch to MIDI. We enter the Parallels universe with Softube. Twisted Electrons release yet another little box. Talking of little boxes, we check out the Nanoloop. And it's Moogfest time again, and I really would like someone to buy me an engineer's ticket. But first, the Thomann Synth Reactor event. Yeah, I'm sure you're all really tired of hearing about it now. All these videos and content and people like myself going, oh yeah, it's Thomann Synth Reactor. I imagine you're all eager to know about how much of a good time we all had. Well, the news is that we all had a great time. It was a fabulous event. None of us are very sure about what it was supposed to be about before we got there. It seemed like some kind of marketing corporate sort of nonsense. But we all thought that, well, hey, it's a free trip to Germany, so let's give that a go. And it turns out to be just the most interesting and fabulous thing. They got all these people together, all these YouTubers from different places like Bo Beats and DivKid and 8-Bit Guy and Simon the Magpie and Look Mum No Computer and Doorless Jammin' and Dr. Mix and well, all sorts of people really. And the idea was you throw them together into one place, give them a bunch of gear to play with and see what comes out the other end. And that was pretty much it. There was no pressure or obligation to do anything or to be anything or to say anything to anyone in particular. They just had these big tents, and in the tents were a bunch of brands who had sort of, paid to be in our presence. You know what I mean? They had a bunch of gear out and we could try that out and talk to them and get deep into their synthesizers or their software or whatever it was that they had on show. And so there were elements of it being a trade show, but it was nothing like it because it was nice. It was not sales reps having to deal with the public and talking to them and doing product demos, that kind of thing. We were people, well, I'm not necessarily including myself in this, but generally we were people who were supposed to know about these sorts of things and could so have intelligent and relatively high-level conversations about the technology, about what's going on, about the sound, about how you pull things out of these synthesizers and bits of technology. And we were given quite privileged access to things like the Moog 1, to the Behringer stuff at both ends of the scale, if you know what I mean, but also Roland gear, old gear. There was vintage stuff there. There was cool bits of software which you're not allowed to talk about. And we also had access to anything else that was in the shop. So that's great, you say. Well, I hope you had a jolly good time. Well, we did, thank you. But I think the result of this event is actually going to be kind of positive for everybody. I mean, first of all, I was able to make some videos about some interesting things, some of which I've already published, some of which are still yet to come. Secondly, we're able to meet and get to know these other YouTubers, which would probably mean that we'll be able to do more collaborations down the line. We'll be able to support each other's channels and what we're doing, and hopefully that will have the knock-on effect of improving our content and our output. I mean, already I've gone crazy on thumbnails. My thumbnail game is now, is up here just through talking to these other YouTubers about these sorts of things. Also, it potentially gives us more leeway with the manufacturers. So hopefully we'll be able to get more access, better access to more gear. Because on my channel, I get to really review things I either buy myself or somehow manage to get hold of. Whereas perhaps now I'll get better access to more gear so I can provide better tutorials, better reviews, and ultimately better content for you good people. So yeah, I don't want to drone on about it now. I mean, if you want to talk about it and ask me questions about it, then come along to the live stream this Sunday, 8 o'clock. Oh yes, it's another Molten live stream. And then we can chat about it far more openly then. But probably my highlights, alongside meeting all these interesting, weirdo, awkward synthesizer people, which was great. We had a really good time. Other than that, the highlights for me was spending some time with Dieter Doepfer. That was fantastic. I learned an awful lot in our conversation and I did a video of it, and that'll be coming along soon. And he's a fabulous bloke. What a thing. I never thought that would have been something that I would be able to do. So that was a major highlight of my weekend. That and being entertained by Stroma or something. I don't know. This band who played on Urak. Two guys played Urak. One guy played sort of percussive stuff. One played melodic stuff. It was fantastic. It was just the most amazing gig ever and so inspiring. I'm so inspired by that and hope to take that feeling into my own music, you know, with a lot less gear, I imagine. But ultimately, we're coming out the other side with a lot of great ideas, a fabulous experience, some new mates and contacts and stuff which we think will take forward and could be interesting for all of us in the future. So yeah, that was nice. A mysterious render appeared of what was called an SP2400, and that appeared to be related to an old EMU sampler called the EMU SP1200. Seemed to have similar things going on. There seemed to be filters and outputs and all the sort of things you'd expect to find on a sampler, but we couldn't work out where it came from or who was taking responsibility for it. But after some more renders of some kind of box of pads on and sliders, it became evident that it was actually coming from a company called Isla Instruments. Now, Isla Instruments previously made something called the Chord Bot, which was this kick-started device that had a whole load of MIDI stuff inside. You could kick out all sorts of chords and expressions and MIDI notes and stuff. It was like a MIDI groove machine all in a little box. And so for them to be creating a sampler seemed slightly odd. But once you dug down a little bit, you find that the people behind the Chord Bot were actually people who like to mod drum machines and have tons and tons of experience in the industry of modification, electronics and bits and pieces. So anyway, they decided that they are going to revisit the EMU SP1200 and re-release it as the SP2400. There's not a whole lot of detail on it yet. It's still under development, but essentially it's a sampling drum machine. You've got drum pads, you've got faders on the front, a few knobs, you sample a whole load of stuff in and then kick out beats. You know, it's that kind of thing, drum machine styly. The plan is to be able to put in all the libraries from the old EMU stuff and to offer the kind of tonal character of that in being 12-bit and low sample rates, but also going all the way up to 24-bit and 192K high pristine levels of audio as well. And hence the name, the SP1200 was because it was 12-bit, and so the SP2400 is 24-bit. We don't know a whole lot about it, but it's going to be about $1,000, they hope, and should be coming along sometime this year. Sampleson have released another electric piano, a Wurlitzer this time. They've previously released a Rhodes piano, and there's a lot of these around. There's a lot of virtual electric pianos out there, so what makes this one any different? Well, the approach to these pianos is slightly different. They are modeled through spectrum analysis. What they do is they analyze all of the sounds and behavior of these devices and then break that down into the component sine waves. And this, they say, essentially unlocks the spectral DNA of the instrument. So rather than having a massive 5 gig library of sampled sounds, they have a few megabytes of sine waves, and those sine waves are recombined in interesting ways according to their sort of organic behavior algorithms and genuinely and authentically recreate the sounds. It's quite good. I mean, they sound great, and they're tiny, these things. You can run them on any sort of computer, and they sound pretty darn authentic to me. The Rose one was called the Marcus 88, and the new one, the Wurlitzer, is called the Reed200. They're cheap, simple, really cool, and sound great. You should go check them out. Rare Waves out of Texas has released the Hydronium. It's an acid-based synthesizer voice for Eurorack. It's a single oscillator semi-modular synthesizer with pulse and sawtooth waves and a 12 dB filter and a simple decay-based envelope. It looks pretty simple, just got 9 knobs to do things with, but the sound coming out of it is just so squelchingly acid that I think they really completely nailed the idea of being a bit of a 303. You can get it as a tabletop version as well for a bit more money, but otherwise, if you've quite fancied a little DIY challenge, then the kit is just over $200, which is really nice for a full synth voice. Talking of 303s, Roland have finally released the TB-303, the bassline. Oh yes, they've brought it back from the dead just like we've always asked them to, and they've presented it to us as a piece of software. Hooray! Hooray! I don't get it, Roland. I don't get it. I mean, it's good. I mean, we love VST instruments. That's great. We love having all your stuff as VST instruments. That's also great. And here we are. We have the TB-303. Finally, the little bass line, the little squidgy synth that everyone believes they really, really, really want because we can't have it. And you've given it to us as part of the RolandCloud subscription. So you can now go online and download the TB-303 VST plugin and play with it to your heart's content with that authentic, analog circuit behavior sound that you do so well. I mean, it will sound great, it will work great, it will do exactly what it's supposed to do, but it's just not really what we want. We want it in a authentic hardware box with an authentic analog sound. But it'll do. So if you want a TB-303, you can now have one. I know Roland do the TB-03 and they do other approximations upon it, but if you want the genuine article, the closest you are going to get at this time is on the RolandCloud with the software version of the TB-303. It comes with some cool extras as well. You can expand it, and you've got a sequencer thing and all sorts of bits and pieces going on there, which is what you can do with software. That's why software is so exciting and so cool. But no, we just really wanted it in hardware. Oh well. Now, Doepfer has released their range of polyphonic modules. And this is really fascinating. To get polyphony in Eurorack is difficult because you need to, well, double and then quad up on everything. I mean, to play a chord, you need at least 3 oscillators, if not 4, really. And then you need everything else to go along with that. And I've struggled a bit with this in my head as to what is actually required, because surely you could just get 4 oscillators and play them together and you've got a polyphonic synth. Yeah, kinda, but not really. What you tend to have is a paraphonic synth, which means you've got 4 voices, sure, but then they are all being funneled down the same signal path, which means you lose that individual processing on the individual notes. If you play a chord, no problem. I can play a chord, I get 4 notes, stick it through a filter, they all get filtered together at the same time. However, if I play 4 notes separately, overlapping, then if you're paraphonic, the filter's not going to get re-triggered every time. The envelope's not going to get re-triggered every time. It only gets triggered on the first initial attack and release. So for chords, that's fine. For individual playing and overlapping, that does not work. And that's something that I've only really just understood by talking to Dieter Doepfer himself. Because, and as I said, my highlight from the Thomann Synth Reactor is that I got to sit down with Dieter and talk about these modules. It was brilliant. What a nice bloke. And within that conversation, it suddenly dawned on me what the difference between paraphonic and polyphonic actually is. That was very interesting. I'm going to talk more about that, I think, at another point. But suffice to say that there are now a range of modules available from Doepfer dealing with polyphony. So you've got a quad VCO, then you've got a quad filter and a quad VCA and a quad envelope, and then also a MIDI to CV interface to turn your keyboard into CV. But as Dieter, funnily enough, said, that's not really the point. The point is not to be able to stick a MIDI keyboard into the quad VCO. The idea is to use it within Eurorack with all the usual sort of ways that you use sound and trigger things in Eurorack. It's just that it will be polyphonic. And that's interesting. Very interesting. I feel that there is a quad VCO at the very least in my future. I'm just not entirely sure how I'm going to get hold of one. And the funny thing is that Stromer, who played on the Saturday night at Thomann, they were using Doepfer's modules to magnificent effect. You heard the polyphony of the quad VCO going on, doing extraordinary things, and none of that was from any kind of MIDI keyboard. It was all built in to their Eurorack performance. It was phenomenal. Phenomenal. So yeah, I'm well into that, because I mean, I've had this thing where I'm very drawn to a polyphonic synth at the moment. I want to be able to play big chords and pads and that kind of thing. And I've been looking at all these different polysynths as I did over the weekend at Thomann. Whereas it occurs to me that maybe I need to shift my focus, and rather than going for the big pads, I need to see how I can be using polyphony within Eurorack, because that could be interesting, because it's restrictive and creative, and it then generates more possibilities. Perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, if you're interested in getting into polyphony in your Eurorack, then Doepfer has things for you to make that work. Right, Thunderbolt and USB. If ever there was a messed up, screwed around, confusing and kind of pointless circle of nonsense, then it is the whole Thunderbolt and USB thing. What is that about? Who understands any of it? I don't know. But thankfully, there have been strides recently to try to bring this whole thing together so that it makes some kind of sense. There is USB 4. USB 4, can you believe it? So yes, USB, which is, you know, backwards looking because it's compatible, going all the way back, but brings in higher bandwidth and higher speeds. So what sort of ports are they going to use for that? Well, of course they're going to use a Thunderbolt port, aren't they? So I've got this USB 4 cable going into a port that looks like a Thunderbolt port. Now, is it USB or is it Thunderbolt? Because that's been the problem with USB-C. That's been the problem. You don't know what technology is behind it, so you end up with these cables that you think are Thunderbolt, and it's not Thunderbolt. Is it Thunderbolt or is it not? And then some things support Thunderbolt, some things don't, and you're using the same cable. It's like, ah! So, USB 4.0 and Thunderbolt 3 are getting together to become essentially the same thing, as in it's going to be present on all ports. The reason for this is that Intel has talked about this previously, about building Thunderbolt into the actual CPU. Well, it's finally got its finger out and is now doing that. The other thing it's done is made Thunderbolt open. So it's no longer a closed thing, no longer requires royalties, and so manufacturers can develop for Thunderbolt just as cheaply as they can for USB. Hooray! So that means, hopefully, that every USB 4 port we will see on future devices will also be Thunderbolt 3 compatible, and vice versa. So Thunderbolt and USB will go hand in hand. It will be one cable, one device, and everything will just flipping work on it. Well, possibly, because we know Thunderbolt on Windows has been a disaster. You can't add it after the effect. You have to have it built into the motherboard, and then it has to be a particular motherboard, and then it needs an expander for it to enable it, although the technology is already there, and then it's expensive, and then the audio interfaces for it are expensive, and they don't know whether they support that particular sort of adapter or that adapter. Oh! So yeah, it will be great to have that finally sorted out. So, nice one. Hopefully, in the future, very soon, Thunderbolt 3, USB 4, all be the same thing. One cable, job done. On Kickstarter at the moment is something called Spice. It's from Plankton Electronics. That's the same company that brought us the little Ants semi-modular synthesizer a little while ago. This is not a synth, it's an effects processor. More specifically, it's a distortion box. It's a warm, analogy, distortion, overdrive, saturation type of box that's got a whole stack of different sorts of distortion in there and ways to crap about with your signal. It's a bit like the electron analog heat, someone has described it as. But it has 7 types of analog distortion. It's also got a digital section with things like bit crushing and sample rate squeezing. It has a whole bunch of filters, a load of patch points. You can patch things from different places to different places. It comes as a desktop or a Eurorack module, and it's the sort of thing that can seriously spice up your audio. It also features that weird new tone, strange valve thing from Korg in order to produce some of the distortions. And I have no idea whether that's a good thing or not. And out of this whole project, a few individual Eurorack modules have also spilled, so it's a great thing. And they look very interesting indeed. Now, it's on Kickstarter, and they're looking for something in the region of 450 euros per unit. So it's quite ambitious, but hopefully they will get there. Now, Eurorack, as we know, is flipping expensive, and there's always people out there trying to bring in some kind of budget version. One such person is Rob Spencer, formerly of GMSN, who is releasing what he's calling the Equinox Synth. It's a range of modules, simple, basic, good quality, low-cost Eurorack modules. The idea is that we should be able to build a complete synthesizer voice from individual modules for just a few £100. Is it going to work? Difficult to say. Difficult to say, but he's sending me one so I can try it out and I'll be able to let you know, because it's something that really interests me to see whether you can get like a full Eurorack experience out of a number of nicely cheap modules. Because opening it up to a wider audience, in my view, is always a good thing. And if there's a way in which is slightly less scary in terms of investment, then that's got to be very cool. Currently, the range includes a VCO, a VCF, a VCA, an LFO, and an ADSR, so all the usual suspects. And in the future, he hopes to expand it into more modules and into cases, power supplies, and all that sort of thing. So do stay tuned for my review of that. It will be coming along soon. Now this is one of those weird things where you think, I've heard all this before. Haven't we heard all this before? I mean, back in the 1990s, right, when I was doing my university degree, my final project was on pitch to MIDI. I took the pitch from a flute that I had made, funnily enough, and I took that through some circuitry and produced MIDI out the other side. I was able to play a Korg M1. It was fantastic, but that was 30 years ago. That was many, many years ago. And yet here we are with this new product called the Dubler Studio Kit, which claims to kind of have invented or reinvented or redone the whole idea of pitch to MIDI. Takes pitch, converts it into MIDI, you control stuff. That's the idea. I mean, like I say, it's weird, and we've been doing it for years. I mean, we've got guitar synths which do that kind of thing. You've got envelope followers in Eurorack and other synthesizers which do a similar sort of thing in order to grab triggers and to shape envelopes and to then convert that into MIDI. Or you've got software like Melodyne and Autotune and other bits and pieces like that that extract MIDI from audio. So what is it that the Dubler Studio Kit is doing that's new and exciting? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's to do with the real-time nature of it. It's taking your voice. I mean, they do lots of examples online with beatboxing. So rather than recording your voice doing the beatboxing, you use your beatboxing to trigger virtual drums instead. But you go, well, what's the point of that? Well, I guess it's great if you have no ability to slap keyboards or pads or anything, I suppose. I don't know. Or they had this other thing, the way you change the shape of your mouth, and that changes whether you're doing notes or parameters. Or you can use it to just tap any surface in order to take that as a trigger for, again, percussion or bits and pieces. Or, of course, if you have no musical ability, you can't play any kind of instrument, and you just want to sing in your notes, just like you used to do in music time back in 1996. However, they have put together quite an interesting package of software and hardware. It comes with its own microphone, which makes you think maybe it doesn't work as well as they thought, and they have to take a specific range of the voice in order to make that work. So it's perhaps not a post-production process that you can add to audio that you've already recorded. It has to be done live, but then it's a live performance tool is kind of what they're after. But any kind of demo of this sort of thing where you're going la, bing, la, bing, is always a bit kind of funny, really. Anyway, who knows? Who knows? It's been massively funded on Kickstarter, so obviously people want to have a go with this sort of thing, and time will tell whether it will actually be of any use to anyone at all. Now this is really interesting. What Softube did, they went to some shop in Sweden and they recorded a whole load of stuff off a bunch of vintage synthesizers. They then took all of that source material and squashed it together into this rather intriguing software synth called Parallels. You take two sources, if you like, stick them together. These are sample based, but you then granularly go around to decide what part of that sample you want, either a very long one or a very short one, and blend them together with modulators and filters and effects and all those sorts of bits and pieces, and it comes out the other end sounding quite extraordinary. But rather than taking like individual samples of lots of different notes, they took like a 15-second sample of something that was happening. So not just a tone, but a tone that moved or was filtered or that was modulated or moved about. So you have essentially this sample library of very creative sounds where decisions have been made, creative decisions have been made on how that sound is going to be. And that gives it a vibe, a flavour that you don't find in more sort of straight-laced sample libraries. And so essentially you're starting off with this very interesting, this very vibrant sample library, and then you're messing around with that. Now I did a video of this at Thomann along with Lars from Softube, who talked me through it, and it really was my very first look at the piece of software. I found it very interesting indeed. I should have that video out next week with a bit of luck, so do go and check that out. But otherwise, the look and the sound of Parallels has really captured something in me, I think, and it's probably going to become my current favourite VST instrument. Twisted Electrons seem to release a new box of beats or sounds every 5 minutes. The latest one is called the Deton 8. Deton 8. Is that good, yeah? It's a little drum machine. It mixes up 8-bit samples with wavetable synthesis and can generate up to 8 voices. It comes with all the usual sounds you can imagine, like your kicks, your snares, your toms, your bits and pieces, but it also has this wavetable angle, which apparently is inspired by the Nintendo Entertainment System. It comes with a range of different kits that you can swap and change over USB, but you can't, or at least at this time, upload your own samples. There's lots of variation available on different knobs on the top, and you've got pitch and tune and decay on every voice, and all these can be programmed per step. There's also delay, remodulation, a stutter effect, beat, repeat, forward, reverse, granular. I mean, they pack a whole load of functionality into these little boxes. The sequencer can store 16 patterns of 16 steps, and you can chain them all together to make songs. Talking of little boxes, there's something called the Nanoloop, which has just hit Kickstarter. It's a little handheld synthesizer sequencer drum machine. It's essentially a gamepad. It's about the size of a game controller, and that's what's inspired it. It's got a D-pad controller for moving things about. It's got a bunch of lights and buttons in the middle and a couple of fire buttons over here, so you can shoot down aliens while you're making your tunes. It looks like the sort of thing that would be along the lines of Teenage Engineering Pocket Operator. I mean, I'd like to say it's more like an OP1, but I don't think it's quite that complex. So Pocket Operator sort of size thing, something you can pull out of your pocket, make a bunch of noise on, sequence stuff, and put it away again. Runs on batteries, plug in your headphones. Really very easy. There are 4 channels of sound. You have a dual square wave oscillator with an analog filter. Then you've got polyphonic FM and monophonic FM, and then a bunch of percussion type noises. So essentially 4 tracks of stuff. Percussion, some polyphony, some FM, and then some squelchy filter-laden oscillations. Simple interface, looks great, sounds alright, and it's about 100 quid. Moogfest is upon us again at the end of April. Everyone will be gathering together where Moog people go in order to celebrate everything that is Moog synthesizers and Moog stuff and Moog merchandise and workshops, and there's lecturers and there's artists and there's performers, and it's just like one big party. But a party where you're surrounded by the history and the glamour and the just coolness of these sumptuous synthesizers. And part of the Moogfest has always been the engineers pass. The idea of that is you spend 2 days with Moog engineers and you build a flipping Moog. You build something. I mean, that's where the D-Fan came from, which is the Mother 32 sort of inspired drum machine. Then they did the Subharmonium, I think it is, last year. Well, this year they seem to be building some kind of vocoder, some kind of filter with a microphone thing, and that's what you're going to do. It's something previously unreleased, something they've never done before, and you're going to get to build it. Along with the engineers pass, you also get VIP access to all the other things, to the artists, to the shows, to the synthesizers, and all that stuff. It's like a dream ticket. It's a Willy Wonka ticket is what it is. And as I've said in previous years, if anybody out there in TV land would just love to buy me the Moogfest engineers ticket, plus flights and accommodation, obviously, then that would be awesome. I mean, even possibly I could give you the device afterwards after I've made it, I suppose, at a push. If you really wanted some kind of reward other than just my thanks, then I could perhaps go that far. But otherwise, it would be a brilliant thing. I mean, make for a brilliant video. I could make some great content on it, that kind of thing. It would be great for you. You could then see that and live vicariously through my DIYing of Moog synthesizers. So yeah, end of April, if you're around that sort of place, it's definitely well worth going just to check out the vibe and to check out the synthesizers. Did you see my video on the Moog 1? I did a video on the Moog 1. I spent some time with it. I did it with Mark Doty, who's the sort of synth head guru historian. He's worked for both Moog and now he works for Buchla, and he's awesome. And we got together at Thomann and got a Moog 1, slapped that down, and just started fiddling with it. So and that was a whole load of fun. We had no clue what we were doing, and I wasn't feeling particularly great. I mean, my throat is only just sort of coming back now, really. And we were all a bit befuddled as to what the purpose of the whole event was at that time, because it was really on the first day. But we had a lot of fun making it. And anyway, you can go and check that out now, I think, in the channel. So that'll do, I think. I'm kind of rushed off my feet at the moment, making videos, editing videos, putting all these things together from Thomann and following up on contacts and and ideas and getting stuff together, I suddenly seemed to find myself surrounded by synthesizers. I did a review of the little Treadstone thing here, and I have another secret synthesizer from Analog Solutions just sitting over there, which I'm not allowed to show you, but you should hear about soon. I also got sent an Uno from IK Multimedia, which I'll do a video on. Erica Synth sent me a modulator module here, which I've already used in a patch, which is an interesting thing, so I'm going to do a video on that. Meanwhile, Black Corporation are sending me over a Deckard's Dream kit. I mean, the kit, the PCBs, I've got to put the thing together myself. But that's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. Can't wait to get stuck into that. That's just amazing. I've got the Equinox Synth little budget Eurorack coming along, and who knows what else. I mean, Arturia said they might send me a Microfreak. I haven't quite seen that yet, but I did do a video on the Microfreak at Thomann as well, which again is in the channel. I did it along with the Behringer Crave just to see what they were like side by side. I then got some other Behringer stuff together as well and did another video on that with DivKid and Noire Blanc V. Oh yes, I did. That's also in the channel. My channel is the most exciting place to be just at the moment. And videos which aren't up yet that I did at Thomann are something on the Softube Parallels. I got this fabulous time spent with Dieter Doepfer. And I also did a video with Native Instruments that I'm not allowed to show you until they officially say I can. So yeah, very exciting times. I also have a massive update to the Elephant software for the Surface Dial. I'll be tackling that next week with a bit of luck, but it's now far more awesome than you could ever believe it to be. I've got performance testing to come on the Surface. I've got the Audio 2 from Native Instruments to do a review of as well, along with their keyboard, the M32. Tons of stuff. I have just got loads of stuff on at the minute, but hopefully that'll all start coming through the channel as soon as I can get it done. And so this Sunday we're going to have a live stream like we try to do after every Molten monthly. They seem to go all right. People seem to like them, so we'll keep on doing them. So this time, of course, we'll get the chance to talk more about the Thomann event. If you're interested or not, we can completely ignore it. I don't really mind. And we can talk about any of the products that we saw here, or we could make some music, or I could poke around at a synthesizer or two. Whatever you want. Just come along, bring a beer, ask some questions, and we'll spend an hour or two together just chatting and chewing about synthesizers, software, computers, music technology, audio interfaces, MIDI controllers, or anything else that you want to bring along. And if you're around in Norwich tomorrow night, that's Thursday night. I don't quite know when I'm going to be able to find the time to publish this, so whenever it is, it's Thursday night, the 28th of March at Gringo's in the Prince of Wales Road. I am hopefully going to be there at the Electronic Open Mic in order to do 20 minutes of some craziness with this fella here. So if you're about, do pop down. Otherwise, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.